Hello, and welcome to day 2 of our Understanding by Design curricular training. As we continue to establish our common language, our common dialogue, our common understanding of what design is, let us review a few ideas from our previous training. So, you should have been able to, by the end of the day, in the previous training, explore jmctie.com, begin to design a unit. That unit would include content standards, essential questions, enduring understanding / big ideas. What do you want the students to know? What do you want the students to be able to do? Now, in our curriculum hub and in our Google Classroom, you are going to find resources to continue your authorship of your individual curriculum. Let me share a few of those with you. So, currently on our curriculum hub, and this will continue to be developed. As I sit here today and design this training, more resources are being added as we develop them. So by the time you go through this training, there will even be more resources on this hub. There's going to be a supplemental video where we go through the hub tab by tab with Mr. Lee, and we look at the resources available. So currently on our curriculum hub, you can find our slideshow, a welcome and an overview of what we're trying to accomplish through our curriculum hub, our project overview. What exactly are you doing? Now, currently, you have the template for your assignment today. You have a clean copy of this template to have. And then through request, we have also had a general lesson plan template, UbD friendly, for when you get to step 3, your learning activities, your lesson plans that support that will generate the evidence, and then therefore will have students with an understanding of the big idea related to your content standards. So this is going to grow. This is going to be a resource for you. I also want to share with you that there will be graphic organizers available to you to help put your thoughts to paper before you complete your further templates. And all of you will be receiving a scanned copy of this, and we are also going to make these large paper copies available. You have a graphic organizer for our unit design, and then there's another graphic organizer here that I will explain later relative to our learning activity design. So let's look at today. So we were on jmctie. We began to design a unit. We established our big ideas related to our content standards. We have our enduring understandings. We decided what questions will lead to answers on these big ideas and enduring understandings. that will give us a degree of proficiency towards these content standards. Relative to that, we've decided what the students need to know, and then based upon their knowledge, what skills will they develop. So today, and again, there's a 7 hour time frame today, but this is obviously working at your own pace. And this was the original agenda was designed to facilitate a large group of 50 or more and all of us working together. Uh, Hopefully, you're not sitting by yourself, because I think that this has way more benefit if you're working with a colleague, a grade level, a department, etc. But let's look at the agenda for today. So, had we been all together, we would have hung our homework up, and we would have then rotated around the room and looked at everybody's work. And then we could have had some discussion on everybody's work. So, if you are working with a colleague or your colleagues, and you do have all of your work in front of you, what I would ask you to do after we review this introduction is then to take some time and share with one another your thoughts on each other's work and your thoughts on how you created your own work. Following our gallery walk, we will look at stage 2, evidence, assessment evidence, an alignment check of that evidence, and are we assessing, and what does it mean to assess understanding? There also is a scheduled break, but again, you are working in the digital world. Your breaks are at your leisure. We will then discuss stage 2, designing authentic performance tasks. And again, that is the ultimate goal. And there is a great tie-in to Daggett's rigor and relevance framework as we go from knowledge, if you will, which may just be in quadrant A, to transference and to application of that knowledge in new and different situations, provide a degree of authenticity, and now we're looking towards quadrant D. Following our designing of authentic performance tasks, there will be a break for lunch. After lunch, stage 2, evaluative criteria, design time. So this will be in the afternoon. You will have time to work on designing evidence with an understanding about measuring understanding. Finally, today we will introduce the GRASP concept for learning activity design. But what we want to keep in mind today is we are focusing on stage 2. What is the evidence that will demonstrate proficiency against a given standard? What is the evidence that will help us determine whether they have an understanding of our big idea? This is where UbD departs from conventional unit design and planning. Typically, we teach, and then design the assessment. No, we're going to plan the assessment first, our summative assessment that we're going to correct for right and wrong. Then we're going to work backwards. Now that we know what we want to measure, what lessons will provide the knowledge and skills that will equal proficient measurement? What then logically flows in an orderly progression of activities specifically designed to meet that target? And again, that target would be proficiency on a given content standard as linked to our big ideas and as explored through our essential questions. Okay, so let's take some time right now and let's look at each other's work. So we want the work to be able to transfer the learning and create problem solvers. If they can only use your work in one given area without transferring that work to new and different situations, then it has limited meaning. We want to equip them with the understanding, skills, and knowledge that are essential to real life situations. All this is a means to an end. All this is a means to an end. We don't teach ELA for ELA's sake, math, science, the arts, etc. These are all a means to create critical thinkers and real life problem solvers. So take some time, look at each other's work, have some discussions, and come back to the presentation when you're ready. Okay, thank you. Again, it's always better to work collaboratively. Don't we try to foster engagement with our students? We don't tell scientists in this world to go into your lab, don't work with anybody else, don't share your work, don't talk to anybody, right? We expect problem solvers to think, to experiment, to risk, and to work with other problem solvers. Okay, let us look then at our corresponding guide that goes here, our Understanding by Design Principles and Practices. And let's look at page 48. What type of assessments do you normally use? Now, when we're talking about assessment, right now, that can be formative or summative. We obviously need to have check-ins along the way to know whether our students are meeting the individual benchmarks, if you will, of learning along the way during that unit. And then finally, there would be the quiz, the test, or the exam. So look at some of the examples provided there. Types of assessment tools: observation, anecdotal notes, anecdotal records, notes, checklists, portfolios, etc., speaking and listening. So we have a bunch of examples there of formative assessments. And if I really go back, I know that this district has spent a lot of time relative to Connie Moss and the use of formative assessment. Indeed, I believe at least 2 years, Ms. Moss was here working with the skill. So many veteran teachers ought to be well versed in formative assessment. But how do you go to the next step if you don't know where your kids are currently? So formative assessment is just natural, I believe, for quality teaching, and I'm sure you believe that as well. But relative to those formative assessments, what type do you use? What type do you find effective for your curriculum? How often do you use a particular assessment? Do we fall into using the same one constantly, or do we have a toolbox? I would like you to take some time and talk with your group on types of formative assessment. What do you use and why? Please pause the video and return when you're ready to continue. Thank you. So if you look at page 48, part of our reflection can include sources of evidence, a self-assessment. So look at, on a 4-3-2-1 scale, examples 1 through 11. Please take some time and do a self-assessment on your sources of assessment. Please pause the video. Please complete page 48, and please return to the video when you're ready. Thank you and welcome back. So just as whether it's the examples on the slide or whether it's the examples here on page 48, obviously there's no singular formative assessment that works best all the time and works for all purposes. But obviously you can see that some are going to lead themselves naturally to different content areas, perhaps. Like, for example, as a former social studies teacher, one of the things that I jumped to was written and oral responses to academic prompts. I find one, number 9 and number 10, that can be very powerful in that student self-assessment. So what do students think about their own learning? And also discussion with peers. By having those peer reviews and peer response groups, you gain feedback as the instructor, and then they gain feedback as the learner. But several good examples on screen, several good examples on page 48. No particular right or wrong, no particular example works in every situation. Okay, collection of assessment evidence. What performance task assessment do we use and how often? What type of assessments are aligned to standardized testing and how often are they used? And relative to that second question, does it become mutually exclusive? What is the balance between authentic assessment and performance based assessment? Can they be combined? And if so, how? Grades 3 through 8 plus the keystones. We know we are going to take a state assessment. We know the format of that assessment, but even multiple choice can provide a degree of authenticity. But how do they structure their questions? What do we need on our writings, particularly on our text dependent analysis? Quite frankly, my equivalent, if you will, sometimes I think that the text dependent analysis most closely resembles a brief. So, our collection of evidence, what do we do? What do we gather that we understand the learner is proficient against that big idea and against that standard? What exactly do we mean when we say performance tasks? So, what I would like you to do at this time is reference your most recent summative assessment or any summative assessment you might have handy. I'll give you a moment to either pull one up out of your Google Drive account or perhaps you have a paper copy handy. What did you expect the students to do in that last summative assessment? What skills were they demonstrating in that last summative assessment? Was it a performance task? Was there a degree of authenticity? Was it aligned to standardized testing? Again, these are the questions that we need to ask when we are gathering our evidence. How are we incorporating the authenticity that will then demand a transfer of knowledge and skills beyond one content area? And at the same time, have our instruction aligned to those standards that we need to be successful on the summative assessment that is the state test. It is not an easy task whatsoever. So, a performance task, students may assume roles in a scenario that are situated in a real world and contain the types of problems that might need to be solved in the future or the present. And I believe that there are many content areas that open themselves out and many units that open themselves out to that real world role play. Because don't we want them to take what they are learning in our different classes and apply them to their real life? So the answers provided are cast in real world formats. So, what are we expecting them to read, to write, to speak, and how are we getting them to think critically, to analyze, to problem solve, and to communicate? Please look at this time at pages 52 and 53. On page 52, we have performance task review criteria. What I would like you to do at this time is look at questions 1 through 10 and then assess a rating of 3, 2, or 1 relative to the criteria of your last summative assessment, or of maybe even in general how you design summative assessments. Take some time, complete those 10 questions, and then we'll come back and discuss. Please pause the video at this time. Please complete page 52 and return to the video when you're ready to continue.